My name is Elizabeth Barber. I'm 36 years old. I have been married for coming up on 15 years, which is a long time for someone who's 36. We got married when I was 22 and he was 23. And we have 3 children, Caroline, who's 8, Kate, who is 5, and Drew, who is a very vibrant 2.5. I am no more than a 6th generation Cincinnatian. And I use that terminology for a reason. It's because I'm always very aware of my place in time. That while I'm sitting here telling you a story about my 36 years, I'm actually just one small player in this story that's been playing out for generations before me, and it will play out for generations after me. So everything I'm talking about is just one tiny piece of that. And the fact that it's a 6th generation Cincinnatian, the reason that has significance for me is that both sides of my family are relatively new Americans. My dad's side came to America within the past 200 years, and my mom's within the past 150 to 100 years, and they are the ones who came to Cincinnati. So I feel this city very deep within my heart, and I think that's why. And then the other way that has played into this is that when people move to a new country and start their families and start lives over again, they bring with them these values, values of family, values of opportunity, of freedom, things that they were leaving the place that they came from to bring where they're going. And I think because both sides of my family are relatively newer to this country, that those things are just deeply embedded within me and within our family culture, and that has really shaped what my story is. So I've noticed from the time I was little, there's always been this natural bent toward creativity. And it's not creativity in the traditional sense, whereas I was an artist or a musician or something like that. It's more this just passion for creating things from nothing. Having an idea and finding a way to make it happen in the world, which is just basically creating something from nothing. And when I look back on stories from when I was little or as I grew up as a teenager, that was just a thread that was always there. I was always looking for ways to create and make things new. I was always asking how things could be done differently, and I just have never been able to look at something and say, let's just keep doing it that way because that's how it's always been done. I've always wanted to try something new and do things differently. And there have also been these 2 threads of passions that have gone through my story. One would be hope, and the other one would be truth. And I actually feel called to be this beacon of hope and truth. The way that hope and truth started to play themselves out in my life was in college. I majored in journalism. I really saw that this was a place I could bring that passion for storytelling and redemption to the world in a practical way. And I ended up also minoring in political science. I had also had this deep-rooted passion for people and for leadership and the way that every society throughout time has had governments that lead it. And I was fascinated by that. And I knew that that could play well with journalism over time. Near the end of my freshman year in college, I had what I would call a spiritual awakening, where I got to know God and learned kind of how He might want to feed into this story that was playing out. And He developed this deep-rooted passion for education. I really, when I sat back and thought about it, thought that if kids are able to be educated and taught and they can be literate, they can have the ability to lead and change the world. And so I saw how that could play together with these other 2 passions that I had, and I ended up adding that to my minor. So I minored in education, political science, and journalism. All fed my passions, and I didn't even know it at the time. While I was at the University of South Carolina, I met my husband, Scott, and he was a baseball player at South Carolina. He was drafted by the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2000. And so that was always this thing that was happening while I was in college. At the same time, while I was getting this education, Scott was going off and traveling the country and playing. Well, by the time I graduated, I got an internship and then a job at Channel 12 here in Cincinnati. And I was there about a year and a half, pursuing journalism, learning how all these things played together. And I ended up, when Scott and I got married in 2002, leaving Channel 12, which was a very sad time, but leaving to pursue Scott's career. He was, I don't know if you know much about the minor league baseball system, but he was just beginning his career in baseball, so we traveled all over the country. We lived in Arizona, we lived in Texas, we lived in California, and I had pretty much given my career up at the time. I was really just trying to be faithful in the moment. I knew I was this new wife, and we had this life ahead of us, and we were young. I was 22, and so we just pursued this wholeheartedly. We got to see so many things through doing this. There were 3 years that we were traveling for baseball, 2002 to 2005, and we learned what different cultures were like. Even within America, there are different cultures all over the country. We got to learn how different governments are set up. So when you live in Anderson Township, you think every city in the world has a township government, and that's just not the case. And you think every school system is set up the same way that Forest Hills is, or the same way that schools are set up in Ohio. And when you live in Texas, you learn that that's not the case at all. The other big thing we got to experience was churches. We visited any number of denominations while we were traveling. We would be in some small town, and the only church we could find was some denomination that we had never heard of. And we would just go in and see how these people worshiped and try to learn something from that. So this period of 3 years ended up just being this awakening, this learning period, that things aren't the way that I assume they are, and that everybody has very different lives, and that there are actually things that are happening in other parts of the country that could be brought back to Cincinnati to make it better, to change it. Remember, I'm always looking for ways to regenerate and have hope and bring new things. And looking back, that time ended up really forming what happened when we moved back to Cincinnati. So we did move back to Cincinnati. In 2005, Scott's baseball career ended, and we were really at a crossroads. We had a choice. We had lived many places all over the country and learned to love different parts of the country and had a choice. And we wanted to come back here. Ultimately, all the places we had seen didn't top what we had here. We moved back to Cincinnati. We were really at a crossroads. We had been pursuing Scott's baseball career for those years that we had first been married, and I had pretty much abandoned my journalism career during the years that I needed to really be pursuing it the most. So we really had no idea what we were going to do. We just knew we wanted to be in Cincinnati. I mentioned earlier that I am a sixth-generation Cincinnatian, and the significance of that is that my great-great-great-grandfather started a family business in 1881. It's been going on in my family, passed down from generation to generation. For me, I'm the sixth generation of this business. And when it came time in 2005 to move back here, our bookkeeper of 50 years was getting ready to retire. Obviously, you hear the term bookkeeper, and that makes no sense with my background, right? Journalism, political science, education, bookkeeper. I'd never taken accounting in my life. In fact, the only class I ever got C's in was anything that had to do with math. So you would think I would have no interest in this position at all. However, this family business had always been just deeply rooted in me. I always felt connected to it from the time I was little. My dad would take us down there for work days, and I can remember napping on the couch in the back conference room. I can remember the smells. I can remember the ways that he taught us about business through this company when I was little, and always feeling this deep connection to it. I always felt passionate about what we did as a business. We actually make ingredients for livestock feed and pet food, so I always loved that part about it. I loved that we make things that make animals better. And while it was completely disconnected from my life, I felt very disconnected to our mission as a business. And also on the other side of that, you have the fact that it's just doing so many great things for so many people. It has fed and clothed and employed people for 6 generations before me. So we come back to Cincinnati and I need a job, and I'm thinking, should I call the news director at Channel 12 or should I take this bookkeeper job at my family business? I took the bookkeeper job. My dad has always instilled this idea in us of just being faithful in the small things. And I knew this was one of those moments where this was a faithful decision. The opportunity's there. I know that there's great things here. I can serve my family. I can serve the business and all the employees there. So I think I'm going to do this. At the time, the business was also growing a lot. So another idea my dad's always talking about is entropy. It's a physics idea, I believe, but it has to do with the fact that things and organizations are always disintegrating and getting worse unless they get this injection of energy and new ideas. And I think looking back, that's really what was happening there, is the business was at a crossroads and I was this new piece of energy that was coming into it. And my brother came into the business at the same time. We were beginning a generational turnover. And so that's how my career at the business began. I was the bookkeeper for 3 years, and it was probably one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had because I worked with numbers all day, every day. I had to learn how to use an accounting calculator and what a balance sheet was, what an income statement was, all of these business and accounting terms that meant absolutely nothing to me before 2005. I ended up taking an accounting class during that time and just learning some ins and outs, but I didn't make any major mistakes. My dad would always say to me during that time, Elizabeth, nothing's going to be fatal. The business isn't going to crash over some mistake that you made. And I'm a pretty big perfectionist, so that always brought some peace to me. But what that time really did was taught me the big picture of what the business was. I mean, I learned what the numbers meant. I learned what it meant when we got a new customer. I learned what it meant when we lost one. I could see the flow of employees coming in and out of the company. I was responsible for a lot of the things that touched the people that worked with us. And I just learned so much sitting at that desk and being the bookkeeper. In 2008, we actually had our first daughter, Caroline, and I knew that I wanted to work less. Every mom faces that battle of how much should I give to work? How much should I give to my family? I was never one of those women who really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I would, but it wasn't something I longed for. So I wanted to come back part-time after I had Caroline. Well, we couldn't have a part-time bookkeeper. So I had to figure out what was going to happen next. So I left on maternity leave, really having no idea what was going to happen with my career. Some conversations while I was gone with my dad ended up realizing that we really needed some help with marketing. So again, no marketing background whatsoever, but I thought I might have something to offer that through the journalism and my love for people and my creativity. This is a way that making something out of nothing could have a place. Our company needed a new identity at the time, a new brand, and so I would really get to spearhead that. So I came back after having Caroline in a completely different role as the marketing director. Once again, having absolutely no idea what I was doing. They coach you through your childhood and especially in high school to know what you want to do, to major in exactly what you want to do. And that was never my story. My story was more being faithful at each step and looking to bring to that what I have. And as the marketing director, that ended up being these little intangible things that I was passionate about that any other company might not have hired me for marketing director, but it ended up working out really well. I did that for 2 to 3 years, and then had our second daughter, Kate, in 2012. When I got pregnant with Kate, I really was feeling this evolution happening where I really wanted to stay home. And this is going to be a different part of my story because I think a lot of women struggle with this battle of wanting to stay home but not being able to financially, and should I take the risk? And if I do, will I be able to ever come back to my career? How will I start over again? I wrestled with that the whole time I was pregnant with Kate. And my dad helped me through that quite a bit. I can remember a conversation that we had one day when I was telling him I was interested in maybe leaving and staying home. And he said, you know, nobody's going to make this decision for you. I can't tell you, Elizabeth, stay home with your children. That has to come from you. That has to be something you want. And you should feel free to make that. On the other side of that, things will work out. And I went home that night, talked to Scott, decided to stay home with Kate. So I actually walked away from my career completely in 2012, having no idea what was going to happen next. That 18 months that I stayed home with Kate were the most peaceful, fun, enjoyable 18 months I've ever had. We really got to just live. I got to be a mom and enjoy that fully, and Caroline was 3 to 4 at the time, and we really lived it up while I was home with them. The thing that happened during that time, however, was I realized that these passions that I talked about earlier just really needed an outlet. I would find myself staying up all night doing marketing projects that I wasn't asked to do and then sending them to my dad on Monday morning, and I wasn't getting paid for it. And they always tell you the best job is to find something you love to do that you would be willing to do and not get paid for. And this time away, this time home with Kate really made me realize that. I realized the boundaries that I needed to be able to be a good mom and serve our kids and our household well, but also that there were things that were within me that I really needed to be out in the world doing, and I needed to find a way to do those at the same time. So our company was really growing during this time that I was home with Kate. We had always been a family member run business. So our management positions had always been populated by family members. And in 2014, we hired a president from a major company in the United States. So he came from big corporate America, come to help us run our company. And this was a big shift for us in culture and everything. Well, his first day on the job, he calls me and says, Elizabeth, I know you're home with your kids, and I really value that. My wife stayed home with my kids, and I thought it was the best thing that ever could have been for our family. But if you're interested in coming back to work here, I will work with you. We'll find a way to let you be with your kids, but also bring what you have to Emmert. So I went to meet with him the next week and took a job. This is how I went back to work. And the role this time was something completely different. The role that he gave me was in colleague development, leadership development, and communications. So I went from bookkeeper to marketing director to people. All these things completely unrelated, no education, no background, but yet they really flowed from who I was and what my passions were. So I took this role as colleague development, leadership development, and really learned that from the ground up. We, in the beginning, brought in a lot of outside consultants. We set out to really encourage people and come up with a company system that would encourage and inspire people from the inside out, that they wouldn't have to go to conferences and classes on the outside, that they could just get it within our culture, our company culture. And we set up all kinds of systems. We wrote a handbook from scratch and set up a 7 Habits class from scratch. The book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People has become a really great teaching tool for our company. And that all kind of flowed out of this time. So I was in the colleague development role for probably about 2 years when I got pregnant with our third child, our son Drew. And when I returned from my maternity leave with Drew, it was very challenging at work. I found going back to work with 3 kids versus 1 and 2 was way more difficult than the first 2 had been. I really struggled that year that I came back. I was still in that colleague development and communications role, but just trying to find where my groove was again. You know, I really lost it when I was trying to get all those pieces put together. So the company was growing during this time, and we were looking for new ways to expand and new things to do. And we had produced this dog treat that was a nutritional dog treat that we really wanted to take to market. And you know, I'm still in this colleague development role, so I really have nothing to do with marketing or product development at the time, but it's always running in the background. So there's one night I brought this sample of the treat home and I put it on the floor to feed our dog. And my son Drew, who was right around a year old at the time, he crawled over to eat it. And I really just kind of brushed it off. And I was like, you know, it's fine, go ahead, you can eat it. I know it's safe. I know everything that's in it. It was made in our facility. I saw the manufacturing process. I know it's not going to hurt you. And I feel like this light bulb literally went off above my head that said, oh my gosh, what if that was our product? What if we put out a mix that allows pet parents to make a treat in the comfort and the ease of their own home? It would all be right in front of them, just like I'm able to see in our manufacturing facility. So I got this idea for treat mix. Now this has, again, nothing to do with what I'm doing. So I had this idea and I just dropped it. You know, I told you I've always had this innate creativity bent going through my life, and I have a million ideas a day. If I pursued every idea I ever had, I would never get anything done. So I really just put this one on a shelf and thought, it'll come around if I need it. Well, this was in October of 2015. The end of November, I was sitting on a round table that I sit on through the Gehring Center for Private and Family Business. It's a group of about 10 women who are parts of family businesses all around Cincinnati. And we always just share ideas and we talk about things we're doing in our businesses. And I, when it was my turn, just happened to casually say this idea that I had. And I wasn't even planning on saying it. I just threw it out there. And I kept talking. And all the women around the table just were looking at me. And one of them said, you need to stop. Stop what you're saying. Stop what you're doing. You need to go do that. That's a really good idea. And they all kind of corroborated. And by the end of the meeting, they had challenged me to bring a business plan back to our next group meeting, which would be the next month. Now, remember, I'm doing colleague and leadership development. This has nothing to do with that. I'm already strapped for time. When do I have time to write a business plan? And what is a business plan? I don't know how to write a business plan. So my first call was to my dad, who obviously knows me really well, knows the business really well, and I just wanted to see what he thought. You know, is this something that Emmert would pursue? Is this something you think I should do, we should do? What do you think? He thought it was great. He said, this is exactly the kind of new energy we've been looking for. Let's see if we can make it happen. So that begins this journey of 2016, where I somehow turn into a brand manager. We started this brand, Whisk and Wag Dog Treat Mix, really as an evolution of all of this story. You know, I told you I had been the bookkeeper and then the marketing director and then colleague development, and then this idea comes. And because I had been faithful in each of those little steps, I was able to make this thing happen in 2016. We started really from the ground up. We reached out to first we reached out to attorneys to see if we could patent the idea, and then I reached out to a branding firm, Spicefire here in Cincinnati, who helped us from the beginning to end. We started with market research. We learned everything we could about who the purchaser would be, and then we created the product around that. And then we just kept rolling from there. Had I not had the experience of all of those other roles, I have no idea how it could have happened. So the idea happens in October of 2015. We were able to launch the product on December 5th of 2016. Beginning to end, 1 year within a company that's difficult enough. I developed so much respect for entrepreneurs through this process because I was essentially an intrapreneur. I was working within a family business, so we have resources there to pull from. I wasn't starting from scratch. But I just really learned the value of what it means to bring all of yourself to the table, because all of those pieces came together to make that happen. It was much bigger than me. It was really just all of these things coming together to make something completely new happen. The process of Whisk and Wag has, I always joke, felt like this blind path that I'm just always walking up this path and opening the next door and peeking around the corner and saying, okay, what's around this corner? Should we keep walking? And sometimes the answer has been yes, we should keep walking. Other times the answer has been no, we should stop, or we should pause and wait. But each time it's just keeping on walking and trusting that the next door is going to hold something that I'm supposed to know. I mean, they joke around the office that every week I say, don't worry, next week we're going to know more. I say that all the time. Next week we'll know. I also always say, there has to be a way. Like, I don't know what it is, but there has to be a way to get this done. And then quickly following that is, I don't know now, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We always do. I really think that comes from this connection to history and this connection to story, knowing that over the course of time, where things might seem tense and like they're not going to work out in the moment, over the course of time, they always work themselves out. And something good is always on the horizon. You just have to keep being willing to walk that path. I feel like the theme of my story all along has been what you do or don't do today really matters. Everything that we're doing and not doing is feeding into this story that doesn't just affect us, it affects everyone who's going to come after us. So the things that I do with my daughters and my son at home, whether it's lessons I'm teaching them or things that I'm letting them see, problems that I'm letting them see me work through, that is shaping and forming who they are going to be and what their story is going to be and what the story will be for generations after me. So this idea of what you do or don't do today really mattering, I mean, I often think back on my great-great-great-grandfather who started the family business. I mean, had he not taken that risk to step out and do something completely new that had never been done before, I wouldn't be sitting here telling you this story today. I mean, he did that in 1881, and I guarantee he had no dreams or visions of someone sitting here in 2017 talking about this. There's actually a letter from his son that I found in our historical archives from 1932. His son Fred had written him a letter asking for a loan to keep the business alive. In 1932, it was the Depression and our business was really in jeopardy, and he was asking his dad for $30,000 to keep the business going. And in the letter, there's an actual quote that says, "To save the business now would mean to save it for generations to come, and that is my one concern." And I remember reading that, man, probably 5-6 years ago, and already understanding how deep that was, already understanding that he had given him that loan to keep the business alive. But now that I'm where I am and seeing it play out, it actually came true. To keep it alive in 1932 has kept it alive till 2017, continuing to feed members of our family through those years and employ people in Cincinnati for all of those years. It just is deep-rooted what happens. It's deep-rooted what we do every single day and the implications that it has.